You had mentioned, like, among the folks on the board, may not be music aficionados, but they love the fact that there's a symphony orchestra here. Wheeling, comparatively, not a big city, but has its own symphony orchestra. What do you think makes that help this orchestra stand out nationally? And what do you think that says about Wheeling as a city, that we have something like that, even though we're not a giant metropolitan area?
Right. We take a lot of pride in the fact that with a population of 26 or 27,000 people in Wheeling proper, we support not a small orchestra, but a robust, medium-sized orchestra, which nationally gets a lot of attention because of the quality of the organization as a whole. And so if you look at the League of American Orchestras, which is our national entity, they break orchestras down into sizes 1 through 8, with 8 being the smallest. And we're actually in group 5 because our budget hovers between $1.5 and $1.6 million. And so that type of robust support for the arts is a huge credit to Wheeling. And one of the things that drew me here was that longevity of support. 90 years was the anniversary we were celebrating during my first year as music director. So that's quite an accomplishment. And the building we're in here is also a big testament to the type of support that the city of Wheeling wants to give to its orchestra and to its other artistic institutions like the Ogilvy Institute, for example. And the support of the board is a testament to that support of the community as a whole, because they are representative of that community. And the other thing that I would point out is, because the orchestra is medium-sized, we're pretty nimble. One of the best things about COVID for our organization was the quick way we pivoted to continue performances starting in May every month during the COVID crisis, which nationally stood out quite a lot because bigger orchestras than us shut their doors entirely. Part of that is a model for other orchestras that can look to us and say, maybe there's an advantage to being in that middle realm where you can design projects more quickly and be adaptive to the things that your audience is asking for you, or in this case, the conditions of the world. And I've loved being a part of that, and the community has embraced what we've done, and it's certainly been a joy to be a part of.
Yeah. Now, mentioning the COVID pandemic, I mean, you had to make that pretty hard pivot when this pandemic hit, and and you're doing it just in like your first year of being the director here. So not only are you trying to get your feet under you as a new director, it's like, oh, we're going to throw the monkey wrench of all monkey wrenches at you. So how difficult was it? You mentioned how nimble you were able to be, but how difficult was that anyways to sit there and go, okay, A, I'm a new guy, B, I've got this pandemic, and C, we want to still keep the performances alive however we can.
Right. I am just one small piece of an enormous team that supports the orchestra, and so I want to share first and foremost credit with the staff of the symphony. During that time, you talk about monkey wrenches. We owe a huge debt of gratitude to Betsy Delk, who during that time was our interim executive director and is now our director of institutional advancement. Brian Bronlick, who was our general manager and is now our executive director, and the rest of the team. Very quickly, we went into crisis mode, and sometimes that's a bad thing because you're responding to an issue you've created for yourselves. But in this case, it was an opportunity. And what we did was we said, okay, there are some experiments that we wanted to take part in over the course of, let's say, my first 5 years. Smaller concerts, more intimate and inviting environments where people can hear our musicians play, combining food and drink with performance, which you can't do as robustly in the Capitol. And because we were forced out of our home, we simply decided to accelerate the rate of those experiments. And we found some really positive feedback from our audience as we moved outside for concerts that typically would have been inside, or accomplished that combination of food and drink with the performances. We shortened the performances. We had our musicians take a more active role in programming the performances, and their individuality could come through. And we've been very pleased with the results, and we have a committee made up of board members and community members called the Audience Experience Committee, which we will be going to after this kind of COVID period closes and ask of them, what did you enjoy most? And we're going to find a way to keep those active, including our Soundbite series, which I think has been the most successful thing. We already have a plan for that to come into our 21-22 season as a fixture of what we do as an organization.
Now, you're going to go to talk to other people, say what they enjoy most. What have you enjoyed most about this?
That is a really, really good question. I haven't thought about that yet because my brain is always working to solve the next problem on our agenda. But what have I enjoyed? A lot of the things that happen day to day with an organization like ours are person-to-person meetings asking for support for the symphony. And we were able to harness Zoom in a way that we were able to have the types of meetings we wanted to have, but more efficiently. And what it allowed me to do was explore new music that I did not yet know. Because when we go to school, we learn a very firm set of repertoire that would be considered the canon. But my mission as an artist and as the leader of this organization is to find great American music that is written by living composers. And during the pandemic, I was able to spend about 3 hours a day researching new music because we didn't have as rigorous a concert schedule, and we were able to be more flexible with the way we operated as an organization, more efficient. And as a result, I feel empowered with this entirely new set of repertoire that I've adjudicated. Because it's very humbling to be able to look at a whole season for an orchestra and say, I have to create an experience for each of these concerts that's meaningful, and the choices I make of who performs as a soloist, who performs as an orchestra member, and what music we play really matters, especially in a town like this where we're really the only orchestra that most people that live in Wheeling will hear in a given year. And now that I've had a chance to say, listen to 500 new pieces, I've picked like 13 or 14 that I think are the best ones, at least as far as I am concerned with my artistic taste. And you're gonna see them on the Wheeling Symphony seasons upcoming, including on this concert we have in a week and a half called Sunday Serenades, where we're featuring a work by Stacy Garup, who is a living American female composer, and by Clarice Assad, who is also a living American female composer. Two pieces and composers that I did not know about at the beginning of COVID.
Oh, wow. Jump a little bit. You're looking at this upcoming season. What do you like most about this lineup that you've been able to put together for this upcoming?
We have 3 artistic priorities as an organization. I've already mentioned the first, which is shining a light on living American composers. And the second of those priorities is to experiment with concert format. We want to take the things that some people don't like about walking into a concert hall and maybe feeling a little uncomfortable with the format. Sit here, clap at this time, listen to this music you don't know a lot about, and enjoy it. Of course, for some people, that's exactly the type of experience they love most, and we want to serve those people. But the Soundbite series is an excellent example of that kind of innovation in design. And the third priority is we want our musicians to have a voice in what we play, because they themselves are incredibly interesting artists. And so next season, I think we found a way to combine all 3 of those goals into that program. And the thing I think I'm most excited about is that we will open our 2022 calendar year back at our home. And we will do so by featuring the voice of Caroline Shaw, who at 30 years old, an American female composer, won the Pulitzer Prize. Like, that is unprecedented. And my favorite work of hers is called Entr'acte, and it is religious in feeling, it is healing in ethos, and it will be a perfect way to welcome our audience back. And we have a way that we're going to perform in the Capitol that uses the building as part of the presentation of that piece in a different way. So I'm very excited about that. Also, one of the things that I said I did over COVID was to find new pieces by some living composers, but also there are some composers that were overlooked in our nation's history throughout the decades as orchestras decided who were the people that we were going to support. We're very familiar with names like Leonard Bernstein or Aaron Copland, but maybe less so with Florence Price or William Grant Still, who were phenomenal artists that had some support during their lifetimes, but were largely forgotten during the latter part of the 20th century. We will feature a piece by Florence Price as the opener on our season finale concert, and as the full second half, William Grant Still, his second symphony will form the benchmark piece for our second concert as we come back to the hall. And then a composer on our first concert that I have had a lifelong relationship with is Eric Nathan. He grew up in the same town as I did. We went to the same music school. We grew up at the same time. And he went on to absolute success. He's had pieces premiered by the New York Philharmonic, the Berlin Philharmonic, the Boston Symphony, but I've premiered pieces of his all the way since I was a master's student at grad school. And he's going to visit Wheeling for a week-long residency in January, and we're going to perform 2 of his pieces. And those types of opportunities to welcome artists to Wheeling and present their music, if we believe in them as artists, is really important to me.
When you have a relationship like that with a person, especially a composer, you know, how does that change the way you interact with not just the composer but the pieces that they have? I mean, because I mean, it's like if like as an editor, I would when my buddy who's like my best friend's the AP sports writing expert, he sends me something, I'm going to approach the editing of that or the suggestions of that a little bit differently than I would someone who's more of a stranger, because we're more comfortable. Does that comfortability change the way you interact or work with them, or does it make it easier? Are you more able to be, I don't know if the word's blunt, but be more open because you guys have such a long-standing relationship?
Yes. It enhances the way I can approach my study and interpretation of the pieces in many, many ways. I am a totalist. If I go into something, I want to know everything about it. You mentioned sports. I'm a diehard New York Yankees fan. I grew up in the Bronx. So I've watched every inning of every Yankees game this season because I just care about it so much. When it comes to music, if you study just the piece that you're about to perform by a composer, it is a very shaky platform from which to interpret that work. You need to know about the composer's life, the politics that were happening in the places they were living while they were writing, what they were responding to, their relationship with their families, their relationship with their peers, the types of things that were inspiring them as artists. And the more that you can know that about a composer, the better equipped you are to deliver the type of message that they intended as you perform their music. And so a lot of people ask me, what do I do on a day-to-day basis as the music director of the Wheeling Symphony? And 50 to 60% of my working day is spent getting to know music better and learning about the people that make it. Because that's how I can be a conduit to create programs that are compelling in the way they're drawn together. And then I can go out and speak to the potential audience members in our community and educate them about why I think it's important for them to see what we're doing here. So with Eric, for example, I know every single piece he's ever written, and I've studied it. And because of that, I don't say that I like them all. Not all of them would be ones that I would perform personally, but there are certain things about his style that I connect to incredibly well. And then when I have a question, I can call him. What did you mean here? This is unclear to me. Can you explain more to me what you want us to do when we get to this moment of the music? And then when we're rehearsing it, he's going to be sitting right where you're sitting. And so if I have a question or something doesn't sound right, we can interact. And with composers that are deceased, it's just not a possibility. Of course, you can't blame them for being deceased. But to me, the idea of working with a new composer who can interact with me throughout my learning process, Eric and I will do an interview that we'll put up online ahead of the concert to get people interested in what we're doing, and then he'll be here. There's nothing better than that. And as a young American man who cares about our country, I say, why do I owe a greater allegiance to Beethoven than to Eric Nathan? I don't know Beethoven. He wasn't a citizen of the place that I live. I view him as an important part of my art form. So of course I know everything he wrote, and I study it carefully, and I perform his symphonies. But I'm much more excited by the interaction with living composers.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you really like having the players involved in the selection. And you'd say about 30% of the repertoire this year was chosen by the players. How important is it for you to? I mean, you're the musical director. You can say, my show, my department. You can be a totalitarian. You can make the decision. Say, I'm going to pick this all. But you've kind of opened it up to be more of a kind of I guess, more collegial atmosphere.
Sure.
How important has it been for you to be that type of administrator, that type of really supervisor, to say, you know what, I want all of you to have a real piece in this, so that you may feel a little bit more ownership?
I have an incredible opportunity here. The Wheeling Symphony, I will always feel a huge debt of gratitude to the people here and to the supporters of the organization, because they picked me. This is my first job as a professional music director. But I've been in the industry for 15 years, and I've seen how people who are ahead of me have operated. And I talk to musicians all the time. How does it make you feel to do this or to do this or to do this? And I've seen musicians get very dispirited as they progress through their careers, if they are orchestral musicians, because they have to sit in the same chair every week, play music that somebody else picked, and play it in the way that somebody else is asking. And if you allow that to become stale as an experience, your creativity can diminish, and therefore the quality of being a member of the orchestra can diminish. And I don't want that to happen here. We have an incredibly vibrant group of people who are artists of the highest caliber, and we talked about sports. You know, football's pretty big, and there's only 11 people on the field at any time, right? Baseball, 9. Here, I have 70, 80, 90. There's so much talent, there's so much learning, there's so much training, there's so much spirit. And what I want to do is find ways that are responsible to create empowering situations for them. And picking the music we will perform and being able to tell the audience why they love it is important to me, because every single one of them has a favorite piece. And wouldn't it be very interesting to you as an audience member if one of the musicians came to the front of the stage and said, "This is my favorite piece of music, and I am so excited to perform it for you." It's probably not my favorite piece, so I'm probably not the best person to explain what turns them on about the music, even though it turns me on. And it makes sense for there to be somebody at the top of the pyramid, because of course I need to unite all of those visions into something that can be organizationally prioritized. But I really want a lot of input from people, and they know that I won't always take the suggestions, but to not ask for the suggestions would be very irresponsible, I feel. And so I want to create that culture where all of the musicians know they can talk to me about their ideas and that they will be considered. But we do have 12 concerts a year, and so not everything is going to work. But when it does come to fruition that a musician's suggestion is accepted and we do program one of those pieces, we want them to be heard during that process and then on the stage at the performance.
Now, you'd mentioned like having the player come up and say, "Hey, this is why this is my favorite. This is my favorite piece." Just really personalizing it for not just themselves but the audience. Like when I've been here before, I've always been just like, okay, you know, this has been a space, you know, between the orchestra and the audience. But you know, when you have someone up and make that personal connection, you're drawing that in closer. How, from your perspective, how much does that change the audience experience when you can just take those two sides and start pulling them together almost to their touching?
That is such a important observation, because I feel that space too. Because I'm in the audience for more concerts than I'm on the stage. I go to as many concerts as I can. And I think that you've hit on it exactly. My mission is to reduce that space and in some cases eliminate it. At our second concert of the pre-pandemic year that you mentioned was my first, there was extra room on stage because the orchestra was small. So I looked at the team and said, "Can we put 50 chairs on stage and have the audience sit on stage with us?" And we did it. And those people will never forget that concert.
Okay.
At the Soundbites concerts, the orchestra, when we are doing it without the COVID restrictions, will be in the middle of the room, and the audience will sit 360 degrees around the orchestra, and there will be an empty seat at each table. Between the pieces, the musicians are going to come and sit and eat and drink with the audience. The audience is going to hear from the musicians directly, and our social media, which is a huge new opportunity area for orchestras as we modernize, I try to tell as personal a story about each piece that we're performing and each artist we're featuring as I can through that channel, and we're finding ways for musicians to do the same thing. For our most recent concert called Musicians Takeover, every group was required to create a video that went up on our social media and on our website that explained why they had picked the piece and what they were excited about, and people got really excited in advance of the night of the concert because of that personal interaction. So what we do requires a little bit of space between the audience and the orchestra,
Right.
but not a lot, and every way that we can, I want to draw us closer to the people that care the most about what we're doing.
Yeah. Now you mentioned social media. Now, like you said, this is your first job in this manner, and at like I said, 35. You are 35?
I'm 35, right? So it's my first job as a professional orchestra's music director.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of the literature. Like you're looked as one of the youngest in the country in doing this.
Right.
How much do you feel that youth and that experience in your generation helps the way you look at the job? Like you're talking about social media now. You know, I'm going to be 44. I'm kind of on the periphery of that. Folks who are older, they don't really look at that. They have to have people kind of tell them why that's important. You know why it's important because you're of that generation. How much do you feel that your youth, your vitality, and kind of your experience in this generation that you're in help you as a director in kind of moving a symphony to the future?
I don't think that my being younger than many of my peers is an advantage in and of itself. But I do think that I am able to relate to what people love about classical music who already love it, but also relate to what people don't like about classical music who are not already subscribers or audience members for our orchestra. And as I mentioned before, I love sports, I love a lot of other things. I am able to interact with people in Wheeling one at a time. My barber, my auto mechanic. I love going to the bridge and just have conversations with people about the things they're interested in. And then they assume that an orchestra conductor would never know about because there's this idea that maestros, right, even just that title, are contained in this world of high art and don't enjoy the things that other people enjoy or like understand what we might not like about sitting in a chair for 2 hours and hearing unfamiliar, sometimes music. So what I try to do is to leverage any channel available to me. Social media reaches 10% of the people I want to reach. My interview with you here may reach 15% of the people that I want to reach. I'm going to go to a donor's farm next month, and that's the way she likes to get to know what we're doing at the orchestra. Great, I'll do all of those things. And as we cast that net over and over and over again, it actually, people say cast a wide net. I say cast many nets because you want to target people exactly the way they want to be spoken to and brought into the symphony. And you have to do hard work to think about what that entry point can be and deliver it. And then maybe you've got a new person. Then you go to the next person. And I really enjoy that process.
How big do you think social media is going to be as a delivery process for symphony orchestras going into the future?
I think it's going to be something that can attract people to the things that we as the artists love about our art form. I don't like it as the delivery method for the concerts themselves. During COVID, many orchestras did advance their streaming capabilities, their video and audio capturing capabilities, and the way they direct concerts from a production standpoint to better that because that was what we had to sell. I watched some of those concerts, but then I ask, does it really matter that that's happening today rather than a YouTube video of the same piece with the same orchestra from 5 years ago? To me, not really. So what I would argue is that social media can be used as a tool to create intimacy and familiarity between our organization and its artists and our audience. But to me, it's just that, a tool and not a replacement for delivery of the product. We want people here listening to the music live because that's the thing that orchestras do better than any other musical type of group is deliver stunning live performances. But we have to be aware of what other industries do better than us, which is figure out how the audience wants to feel, communicating with them during the concert. We have to care about every aspect, from how it feels to buy a ticket on the website, to how the parking is going to be, to how you can get dinner around the area beforehand, and what it feels like to come in and hear our music, and then what's available in the city for you to do after the concert. We're part of an experience, and the more we think about it from that standpoint, as the audience doesn't owe us anything, we owe something to them. A lot of orchestras think about it the other way around, and I think that's a big mistake.
Now, I was looking the Independence Day weekend, and I don't know, and part of my ignorance, I don't know if do you guys usually go that far to like places like Clarksburg and Canaan to do performances like that? Because it seems that there's a real movement to just kind of broaden your guys' scope. And was that something that for this July you're like, hey, let's get out to Clarksburg, let's get out to Canaan, let's start moving the tendrils out a little bit more to rope more people into what we do? Is that the thing, or has this been something that the Symphony's done previously?
Right. We have several programs each year that bring our music outside of Wheeling to places that we want to have a presence throughout the Ohio Valley, and this is one of them. Each year we do a July 4th tour. Of course, July 4th itself will perform in Wheeling,
right.
But before that we do visit other communities. Not only for the July 4th tour, but every year we go to a half dozen schools for a young people's concert tour, where we bring an educationally designed program to students that maybe are seeing an orchestra for the first time. And then we have a program called WSO on the Go, where smaller ensembles, chamber ensembles of 3 to 6 people will go to interesting places all throughout the valley and perform in coffee shops and at bars and at wineries. And that helps us attract a different audience and spread the word of what we're doing here in Wheeling.
How important was the diversity of this season's repertoire for you guys? I mean, you're looking at 60% by American composers, half of them are living, 30% by people of color, 30% female identifying. I mean, there's just, there is it seems to me that there was like an emphasis of like, you know what, we're going to broaden the scope. You're like, Beethoven's big, but it's not just gonna be Beethoven. We're, like you said, we're gonna talk to people, we want people who are living and can explain, and we want people, it seems that you really do want to open the spectrum for the audience, just to maybe introduce them to things that they haven't seen before. How important was kind of the diversity of this for you, especially this year?
Yeah. Diversity is a priority for me in my programming and in the guest artists that we invite to share the stage with the symphony. But it is noteworthy, right, that if a season is 40 or 50% X or Y, that's considered diverse. Some other people would say that's equal, right? Why is it odd for it to be half men and half women, right? And the season does have, Shostakovich and Wagner and Vivaldi on it. And for me, I feel an obligation to explore composers that have not had a light shown on them in the proper way. We aren't programming a black composer's piece because we said we need to program a black composer. What piece can we find to put there? I'm finding the best symphonies that I think the audience should hear, and that one is by a black man, and that's great. In graduate school, I went to the University of Maryland for 7 years. And this is okay, this is not exceptional, but I did not learn one piece by a composer who was of color during that time. And that to me must change, because we need to give equal voice to everyone. Female, black, white, diverse in every way. And I need to be an adjudicator of not just the pieces that I know and love already, but pieces I haven't found yet, because the system, perhaps, has not wanted those composers to be featured, and we have to ask ourselves why. And I don't think that what we need to do is get into an enormous discussion about the history there, although it must be acknowledged, but we need to change now, and we don't need to ask permission or have a big debate about it. We just need to do what's right. And I think the Black Lives Matter movement that happened during last summer is a big symptom of a larger problem, that there is systemic racism in our country, and that there is systemic racism even more so perhaps in classical arts. And anything that we can do to help make things equal, I'm in favor of.
And was there a point during that 7 years at Maryland where you said, like, I had not learned a piece by a black composer, where you're like, you know what? when I get out of here, I'm either going to learn on my own, or while I'm here, or when I get out of here, I'm going to change that, and I'm going to really dig in to make sure that I see look at the broadest spectrum I can of composers, both in history and currently.
Right. While it was happening, I didn't notice it. And I think that's the problem. Because it just seems normal to learn Mozart and Beethoven and Brahms and Tchaikovsky and Ravel, and those are the greats. But why are they greats? There were other composers writing at that time. For example, last winter, we discovered a piece by a composer that lived in the 18th century named Chevalier du Saint-Georges, who was a contemporary of Mozart's, and he wrote all these wonderful violin concertos. So we performed one of them, and it goes all the way back. And so for me, not only did I do some intentional learning, but I have friendships with people in the industry that are female conductors and black conductors. And a dear friend of mine is named Titus Underwood, who is a black oboist in the Nashville Symphony, and he taught a course virtually over the past year that I took through the Richmond Symphony's School of Music. And every week we just talked about black composers, and he told me his favorite pieces, and we researched them, and there was homework, and I did homework. And that type of work is something that as a conductor, as I mentioned earlier, we're constantly doing. Even if every piece of music for orchestra was written by a white person, I would still be learning new music every week. But now it's just becoming painfully acute to me how guided towards one specific canon we are, and that I'm empowered right now to make decisions so that 100 years from now, voices like William Grant Still and Florence Price and Chevalier du Saint-Georges and Caroline Shaw are considered equal to those of Beethoven and Brahms, because it's not their fault that they live right now with a canon behind them. People like me get to shape that future, and I want to be a big part of making sure all voices are heard.
Now, the finale is going to be around a discussion between race, politics, and music.
Correct.
And this was probably exposing my ignorance, but it's not. But orchestral music is not a genre where I normally see that. Or see that discussion. I see more hip hop, folk, rock. Just kind of like with 60s with folks like the NWA, Public Enemy in the hip hop world. But what do you think the audience is going to learn from that performance, and how important do you feel this discussion is for the people who are going to see this in Wheeling?
Yeah. I understand that we need to be accepting of every type of political view in this building. We are a nonpartisan organization. I want to have a discussion. And it would be irresponsible for me to have that discussion alone. So we're bringing in community partners. Richard Wagner was a known anti-Semite. He wrote volumes of books about Jews that say horrible things, but his music is excellent, and it's performed. So we're going to partner with Rabbi Leaf, and he's going to come in and have a discussion with our community about the legacy of Wagner and what type of cushioning around a delivery of his art must take place so that you have a full picture of who he is as a person. And you can perform his music, but you also need to have that discussion. Ron Scott is on our board, and he is an expert in the history of black music in the United States of all types, many of which you mentioned. And he is going to be my partner in discussing the legacy of Florence Price. Florence Price was a composer of the highest caliber, and everyone agrees on this now. But during her time, she wrote, for example, a letter to the music director of the Philadelphia Orchestra saying that, I know that I am just a black woman, but would you consider looking at my symphony? And the music director did not write back. This is the type of thing that makes our industry look poorly. And so I want to bring Ron Scott in and say, okay, there are many, many artists. Florence Price is lucky that now there's a revisiting of interest in her music. What about a lot of other voices, and why did this happen, and how can we fix this? Florence Price is still buried in an unmarked grave right outside of Chicago, and her legacy is not fulfilled yet. We want to be a part of that fulfillment. And then Shostakovich, the final composer, my favorite symphony is his Fifth Symphony, which we'll close our season with. People don't know the story around it. And one of the things that you mentioned, all these different types of music, what do they all have in common? They have words, right? So you can tell a story through words. Why do you not know the story? Which is, most people don't. That's why we're going to do this type of project. Around a Shostakovich symphony, there's no words. How do you know what he means? Well, I've researched deeply into Shostakovich. I'm not joking. The first notes of Shostakovich's Fifth Symphony are tattooed on my left shoulder. I care about this music so much. I've read every biography about Shostakovich. I went to Russia and visited the places that he taught and that he learned and he wrote. And I feel equipped to write about this. He was oppressed by Stalin. After he wrote his Fourth Symphony, he was almost sent to the gulags to labor and then die because Stalin disagreed with a message that was in an opera called Lady Macbeth of Mitensk District, where he criticized the Soviet police. So can you imagine, we don't fight this battle in America where the President of the United States is telling composers, you can't write that piece of art and that play can't be performed, and we have freedom of expression. But it's incredibly intriguing to me to look into places where that wasn't the case. Can you imagine what it means to write a symphony when you know your very life is on the line? And he was not willing to back down. In it, he wrote coded messages to the Russian people who were similarly suffering under the Soviet regime, secret police. And they felt inspired by what they knew were the messages meant for them of hope and resistance and resilience. But Stalin stood up and gave the piece a standing ovation because he didn't understand any of it. And so that story is one that means a lot to me. And I'm going to explain to the audience where those messages are, why they matter. And I love saying this, but Shostakovich outlived Stalin and wrote 15 symphonies and became a legend. And I think that's a happy ending.
Cool. Now, how excited are you to return to as close to normal as we're going to get? You know, from this pandemic, people are going to be back here. You guys are going to be back on stage. It's just going to be. It's going to look and feel more normal. How excited are you to get back to that this season?
COVID was a tragedy, and the loss of life, including many people affiliated with our symphony, contracted the virus or perhaps passed away. It is a deep sadness and a period of time we will never forget. I don't even think we understand the full gravity of what we've gone through. There's going to be a period of mourning. My dad worked 6 blocks from the World Trade Center. In 9/11, I saw the smoke. I smelled the burning. At that time, 20 years before, it feels a little similar in terms of like, we don't really feel safe being out and gathering in large venues. And I mean, you know, we talked about baseball, like when the Yankees came back, it was like a sign of normalcy a little bit for people in New York. But all of a sudden there were these new restrictions, new worries, new fears. And I will admit that even as enthusiastic as I am about music and symphonies, I took some things for granted. I can catch that. I'm a little tired tonight. I don't want to go to that concert, or, you know, I'll just conduct the rest of this rehearsal. I think that in some ways that not COVID itself, but the act of pausing our normal lives is going to give us a renewed appreciation for things that perhaps we lost it for before COVID. And I think that symphonies are going to be one of those things. We are, as I mentioned before, highly responsive. And I programmed every piece that we're going to hear next year thinking, how do I want our audience to feel in this concert hall, knowing full well that we're going to be coming back from COVID. And the messages that I'm going to weave into these concerts will be the ones that I think are going to make people feel like we are something that helps their recovery, helps their resilience, and helps their feelings of normalcy come back, but also their appreciation of the things that we considered normal that we never thought would be taken away. So I cannot wait to welcome our audience back, and I have a feeling that once we feel safe gathering again, that the symphony's importance in our city will be revitalized and renewed, and I look forward to this hall being full when we are allowed to have it be that way.
Looking back, especially over this past year, with all of the hurdles, all of the tough times, what have you been proudest of that you guys have been able to accomplish, especially over this past year?
Yeah, I have to turn to our staff and board once again. This group of leaders was faced with unprecedented challenges. And instead of taking the easy route, which was to press pause and we'll see you when it's safe to gather again, there wasn't even a question of that amongst all of the people that were the decision makers for this organization. We just said, what's the best thing we can do? And we did those things. And so that is what I am proudest of. The people that I work with here are inspiring, they are courageous, and they are incredibly hardworking. And when you have people that are like that, we can accomplish great things. And I look around the country and I feel very, very sad for my colleagues that didn't get to work, but we didn't lose a day of work. We kept going, and I think it's a testament to the city that we live in and the spirit of this city, and it's a testament to the ingenuity of the board and staff leadership here that we continue to make music in every way that we could, and throughout, even non-musical accomplishments were made. We raised a lot of money. We are building our staff and hiring new people, and we're expanding the amount of concerts we're going to perform next year with the addition of this Sound Bites series. And those are markers of an organization that wants to grow, wants to be there in its community during a time of need, and the community has responded in turn with great support.